But today I could talk about all those great technology or about my recent fight with cancer. But I thought I'd really get on with the topic that's very hot in China as well as the whole world, which is about innovation, entrepreneurship, and the core business that I'm working on. So I'm going to tell you about today how we feel about the overall economy, how technology can provide a part of the solution, and what we see in the early investment landscape and what we're doing at InnovationWorks. So a lot of people are concerned about China's economy. We also see that the growth is in fact slowing. However, if we really break down the growth of the Chinese economy, we'll see that while the exports have slowed, the service industry represents 50% of the GDP, and the consumption now is 60% of the growth rate. So what does that really mean? Well, internet is at the core of service, and it's at the core of the consumer economy. If we look at these four different areas on the upper left, despite the slower growth in economy, gaming has been growing very steadily. On the upper right, same with e-commerce. And on the bottom left, we see that even faster growth as the internet and internet technologies start to change the face of the traditional economy. And then on the lower right, we see rideshare as one of the main service. As we saw with Didi, Kuaidi, and Uber, that's dramatically changing the landscape in China. So while the economy may be slowing down, the internet is growing like we've never seen before. So we're very, very bullish about the future of the Chinese internet economy. So even if the economy slows down a little bit, we think the part that's driven by technology and that's driven by the internet will have a great future and will continue to blossom. And really, at the very core of that is the government's strong support. The so-called Internet Plus really is the new engine of growth, and the entire governmental plan is very much centered around Internet Plus. I didn't used to know a lot of big bosses and company owners in China until recently, because many of them have really lived in separate worlds to people like myself. But many have sought me out and wanted to talk, and the essence of what they want to learn about is that they're in some core traditional industry. It may be in making wines or mineral mining industry or real estate, but they're very, very eager to get into the Internet Plus. So they're seeking help and collaboration in terms of how they can embrace the Internet Plus. So without any doubt, there is strong recognition that the Internet is the future for all industries. And it's not just a separate industry. Some of you may remember in the United States, once upon a time, technology companies like Microsoft and others were forming internet divisions, right? And then pretty soon they disbanded the internet division and said, wait a minute, internet is everywhere. We can't have an internet division. And really it's the same with the entire economy. If we kind of track the growth of the traditional, the internet areas, we'll see that if we, in the very beginning, we really are building the infrastructure that is in the operating system, search engine, and IM and social network as a basis technology that are able to provide capabilities in entertainment, tools, transaction, and services. This is sort of the first 10 years of the internet. Then some unique applications were developed over the past maybe 5 or 10 years in all kinds of specific areas. But I think we're now seeing internet really reaching everywhere. It's changing the future of content, the future of TV, the future of business to business, the future of housing, automotive, even going into rural internet and blue-collar internet. So the internet is everywhere, and it's changing every industry, and there's nowhere to escape, nowhere to hide. If you don't change with it, if you don't embrace it, it will change you, and some other company with no baggage will rise up and eat your lunch. So that is a very strong message heard across China, and that's why all those traditional companies are thinking about how do they evolve and embrace Internet Plus. And as you know, the Chinese government has a very strong voice that large businessmen do listen to the government very attentively, even more so than other countries. And when Premier Li is making such a strong message, all these businessmen are listening and following. Now, personally, I think most of the traditional companies will have a very hard time embracing Internet Plus. And that's all the more opportunities for startups. Just as we see, you know, the top companies like in the US, whether it's Google or Amazon or Netflix, they really didn't evolve from traditional technologies or companies, but they came out of the internet space. And that's a very, very important element. And it's our bet that it's the entrepreneurial, smarter companies that, with no baggage, that will end up tackling the traditional industries and taking a big chunk. A lot of the recent examples, Airbnb, Uber, are further examples. So I'll give both Western and Chinese examples, and I think there are strong parallels. So the other very big reason why China is an amazing market is China is now by far the largest monetizable mobile market in the world. And that's extremely important. We all know how powerful the mobile internet is, the mobile revolution and all the things that come with it. With mobile, it's something that you carry with you all the time, very different from PC. It has knowledge about location, it knows where you are. It has knowledge about your friends, your communication, your social. I mean, as a personal tool, it is more than 10 times more powerful than a PC has ever been. So wherever mobile hits, that's going to be a great market, because when you've got your phone with you, that's how you can get services, products, e-commerce connections to people. So China has sort of had all the right things going for it. In the early days before smartphones, China had the most mobile phones. Even 15 years ago, everywhere you went, everyone had a small feature phone, or at least a dumb phone with them. So the usage of a phone as an information device and people access device has been built in. In this way, China is much stronger than India or other countries where the usage of mobile phones has not been as pervasive. So essentially, years have gone by where China's slowness in growth in landline has given it an opportunity to build a strong base in mobile. And essentially, about 2 decades have gone into essentially educating the market that this thing that you take with you all the time is great for accessing people and information. So when smartphone came along, China grew very, very rapidly. So in 2009, when we started Innovation Works, we put all of our investments betting on smartphone in China. And at the time, it was not something everybody liked, because feature phones really didn't very well develop a lot of the capabilities that people had envisioned for years. But smartphone has the location, and it has the application stack that could be built, and we saw that was the future. So we bet on that in 2009, and today there are over 600 million smartphones in China. Very, very rapid adoption. But what's even more important is that in the past 2 years, maybe 2 to 3 years, payment became possible. If you ask people, why would China, if you ask pessimists 10 years ago, why don't you think China would be an IT powerhouse? The biggest reasons you hear about is lack of PC penetration and the lack of credit card and payment. So without that, those are the core pillars of the American internet, right? PCs had to go everywhere, they got connected to the internet, everybody had access to it, and then you have credit cards that enable you to pay for merchandise, and that's important whether you have a virtual or real business that you're building. But China didn't have that. But magically, China overcame both of them in the last 3 to 6 years. 6 years ago began the beginning of the usage of smartphones, and the last basically 3 years, the mobile payment went from nothing to now over half of the installed base. So what really made the smartphones possible, I think, is really cost effectiveness. The data plans are relatively inexpensive. The cost of phones are coming down. Their capabilities were going up. Chinese local apps were growing. Apps like WeChat, those all drove adoption and usage of smartphone. And of course, companies like Xiaomi and Huawei were making cheaper and cheaper phones that made this possible. And what made the mobile payment possible? Well, really it's the venture capitalists who gave a lot of money to companies like Didi, Kuaidi, Yidaixi, and many that have gone out of existence. Basically, venture capitalists funded these companies with the belief that they would use the money to generate users and help users pay. So that's why for the last 2 or 3 years, if you had a chance to live in mainland China, you'd be very fortunate because you could ride taxis for, maybe 70% discount. You could get takeout for maybe half the price. You could get breakfast almost for free every day. You could get cleaning for cheaper than taking it yourself to a laundromat. How was that possible? It's venture capitalists deciding to give money to these startups that offer the so-called shared economy, online to offline services, believing that if you threw money into this industry, companies will offer services to you, customers will get hooked, and having 100 million users one day will convert to a profitable business. Well, the venture capitalists often are a little bit too optimistic and in some cases too foolish, so many of them lost a lot of money. Fortunately, not us. But what really happened? So one could argue, was there a bubble that bursted this year in China? In some sense, there was. If you were in the O2O business, offering, whether it's nail polishing or whatever business that you deliver to people at a loss, so to create more users and then make money later, figure out later, the chances are you ran out of money and went out of business. In a few cases, like Didi Kuaidi, they built such a large business, they killed all the competitors, they remained, and now they can probably develop into a good future. But in most other cases, car services and many of the O2O areas, companies went out of business. And the bubble did burst. It bursted already. But what remained is something very, very valuable. That is, even if you're a user who only took free taxi rides or cheap taxi rides at 70% off when Didi offered it. Now Didi doesn't give discount anymore. You stop using it. Or you bought some free breakfast from some poor company that offered it every morning, and then they ran out of money and went out of business, and you no longer use it. One thing that remained is your phone now has paying capabilities, and that is there to stay. And that's the lasting value that all this cash burned up. Many companies died, lots of money was lost, but now half the people can, on the click of a button, pay for some merchandise. And that is phenomenal value.